Okay, good morning and welcome to the RCEDC Leadership Council meeting. I'm David Griffith, RCEDC President. We have an exciting morning planned for you. Every quarter, the Leadership Council meets to review the annual strategic plan results and guide the organization in its mission. We cannot do the work that we do without our volunteers. We have 5 different volunteer bodies, 3 loan committees, a board of directors, and this Leadership Council. These dedicated individuals invest their time and energy to ensure that RCEDC's mission continues to be relevant and impactful. Thank you to all the volunteers for their investment in Racine County's future. Leadership Council members, all of the normal meeting materials were sent to you and include the regular items such as our current financial statements, our 2022 financial audit report, and quarterly report. Please contact our Executive Director, Jenny Trick, after the meeting with any questions you may have. Before we get to this morning's panel, there are a couple events that we want to share with our attendees. RCEDC's Talent Attraction Initiative is hosting 2 Racine County tours for HR professionals and business leaders to become more familiar with local assets that are important when attracting talent to the area, such as housing, education, and quality of life locations. The first tour is on April 20th and will focus on Western Racine County, and the second tour is on May 25th and will focus on Eastern Racine County. The second event is RCEDC's 40th annual celebration that will be held Thursday, May 4th at 4:30 at the Delta Marriott Hotel in Mount Pleasant. RCEDC will be recognizing our winners for the Sam Johnson Volunteer of the Year, Business Development Project of the Year, and Lender of the Year. We will also be hosting Patience Fairbrother from Development Counselors International, who will focus on talent attraction, what employers and communities need to do to attract and retain talent. If you haven't registered for the 2 community tours or annual meeting, please contact Jenny Trick today and she will get you registered. Okay. Now to transition to the morning's event. Many of our quarterly meetings include guest speakers that inform our leadership about current events, challenges, and opportunities. These topics are so critical that we believe it's important to open up our meetings to the general public. So welcome to all of you. This morning, we have an excellent panel assembled to discuss current industrial real estate trends in Southeast Wisconsin and Racine County. Greg Barron, chairman of RCEDC's board of directors, will be lending his expertise this morning by facilitating our discussion with our experienced panel of real estate professionals and developers. Thank you, Greg, for leading this morning's discussion.
Well, thank you, David, and good morning, everyone, and welcome to our session. This morning, we have a great panel assembled with intimate knowledge of industrial development in Southeast Wisconsin and Racine County. We're joined this morning by seasoned developers, Gary Rosecrans, Ashley Capital, and Chad Navis from Zilber Property Group. We're also joined by one of the leading industrial brokers in Wisconsin, Jeff Hoffman with Cushman Wakefield, Boerke. Now, I have no doubt that many of you will have questions for our panelists. So here's the deal here. We welcome your participation, and let's use the chat function feature on Zoom platform to submit your questions. So catch them in the function there, chat function, and we'll have time at the end to review some of your questions. So let me give you a little more detail about our distinguished panelists. First up, please welcome Gary Rosecrans, Vice President, Illinois Market for Ashley Capital. Gary is responsible for acquisition, development, and leasing activities for Ashley Capital's Chicago office. A longtime friend of RCEDC, Gary has been an advocate for Ashley Capital's investment and growth in Racine County. First, in the 1990s, with an investment in the village of Yorkville, and then more recently with the development of Enterprise Business Park in 2015. In 2019, Ashley Capital announced further expansion of Enterprise Business Park by adding 2 438,000 SF buildings in the village of Mount Pleasant. Thank you, Gary, for Ashley's continued investment in Racine County and for joining us this morning. Next, we have Chad Navis, Vice President of Zilber Property Group Limited with us this morning. Zilber is a privately held real estate development, investment, and management company headquartered in Milwaukee. Now, Chad has more than 20 years of industrial investment and development experience. Chad leads all commercial property activity under the Zilber Property Group brand. In 2022, the RCEDC team was pleased to work with Zilber and the Village of Caledonia to initiate the development of the Caledonia Commerce Park. The new park adds to the inventory of industrial-ready land and buildings in Racine County. When complete, the development will include up to 5 buildings totaling 1.6 million square feet. Thank you, Chad, for joining us this morning and Zilber's investment in Racine County. Finally, we have Jeff Hoffman. Jeff is the co-chair of the industrial real estate practice at one of Wisconsin's oldest commercial real estate firms, Cushman Wakefield Boerke. A lifelong Wisconsin resident and a University of Wisconsin Whitewater graduate, Jeff has advised on more than $1.3 billion in transactions for Wisconsin-based companies and developers. He has served in leadership roles for several business trade associations that improve the state's business climate, including the Waukesha County Business Alliance, Commercial Association of Realtors Wisconsin, and the Wisconsin Realtors Association. We've assembled an amazing group of leaders for you this morning. So on behalf of the RCEDC Leadership Council, thank you, team, for joining us for our session. As I mentioned earlier, I'll be keeping an eye on the chat function. So let's get some good questions in there. And let's go. Let's dive into some questions. So as I've reviewed our panelists' backgrounds, they have great experience. I'm going to lead off with a more general question. I'm going to hit them one at a time. So let's put Chad, you're on deck. You're up first. Jeff, the first question is, can you tell us a little bit about the key drivers that has made let's look at Southeast Wisconsin right now, and Racine County in particular. What are these key drivers that have made investments so attractive in our area over the past few years? Chad?
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me today here. It's a pleasure. And yeah, that's great. That's a great start off question. You know, a lot of people, or some people are born into some success, or at least a good start for it. And I would say Racine County certainly a version of that in its location. So certainly being centrally located between Chicago and Milwaukee didn't hurt the start of success for the region in the area. But it's more than that. It's what it's done since that time. So it's kind of built on that location. I think a lot of the existing infrastructure that's there, located in close proximity, at least for industrial uses out by the interstate, is certainly a huge ingredient for its ability to have some success.
Great. Thanks, Chad, for kicking us off. Why don't we roll over to Gary here for the same question?
Sure, I'll give you a few more. In terms of location factors for industrial companies, the cost of living in Southeast Wisconsin and Racine County is at or below the national average, which is attractive to employers. Also, and this may be a new thought, but Southeast Wisconsin has what I'll describe as a manageable level of natural disaster risk. So, you know, we have some issues, but it's nothing like the epic forest fires or earthquakes or hurricanes or drought conditions that are experienced in other parts of the country. And I think that that enters the mind of business. The other thing, or one other thing that I would add, is access to a workforce with various skills. Albeit I would add that labor is becoming more challenging for Racine County. And I know that the RCEDC is doing some things short-term and long-term to address that.
Yeah, and I think we'll hit up on some questions related to that in a second. Thank you, Gary. Jeff, anything to add on that question?
Thanks, Greg. I would suggest in the last 5 years, in that entire corridor from Oak Creek down to the state line with the build out of I-94's 8 lanes, redoing all the interchanges. That was the proverbial game changer, I think, for the corridor, just the connectivity between Milwaukee down to Chicago. I would also add, both Chad and Gary touched upon the proximity to Chicago, and I think we all kind of look at the Chicagoland area and marvel at the challenges that they are encountering. The reality is Chicago is a logistics hub of the United States, and so as many challenges that either the city or the state has fiscally, that market has 10 million people and serves as a distribution hub. That market is always going to be very, very strong. There are reasons businesses are there. There are reasons why people live there. And I think what is going to be a driver for Racine County over the next, say, decade is Chicago's out of land. And we went on spring break 2 weeks ago. We drove down to O'Hare. If you've driven down to O'Hare lately, you're going to see the Allstate campus about 10 minutes north of O'Hare. That's being torn down right now. It's a former office complex. That developer paid $1 million per acre to redevelop that into industrial dirt. Chad, Gary, I don't know if you can make $1 million per acre work for Racine County land, but the rents down there are double, in some cases triple, of what users are going to pay in Racine County. So I think as you see those costs continue to escalate, because Chicago's just simply out of land, it's going to make Southeast Wisconsin that much more appealing.
Oh, great. So that was a great kickoff. That was our warm-up question. So roll up your sleeves. We're going to put it into overdrive now. I'm going to hit you up with the next question, all of you. I think our audience will be really interested in this question. The question is this: now that Microsoft has announced its intent to build a data campus in Mount Pleasant, what type of development queries have you received, or might you anticipate if you haven't received any at this point? So why don't we use the same order on this Microsoft question?
Sure. Well, it's pretty fresh news, and congratulations to the community. That's a significant attraction win. So we should all be very proud of that and congratulate it. But it's still pretty fresh news. We haven't seen any I'll call it spin or build off of business from it just yet, but I think the region is definitely going to benefit from awareness. Just the name, brand, the attraction of the area will get some regional, if not national attention, which success typically begets more success. So I would anticipate that's the case with this deal as well.
Okay, thank you, Chad. Gary, how about you? Have you heard anything in terms of inquiries, or what you might anticipate?
Well, I'm hoping that we could get another shot at a chip foundry. Unfortunately, Intel didn't pick Racine County, but there are others out there, and those are massive investments, which would be fabulous for us. The only other discussions that I've had about the project have been with subcontractors, and those folks are hoping that they can get some work from the project.
Okay, thanks, Gary. Jeff, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, with the project being a couple of years out, we haven't seen any users show up saying, "Hey, we need to be here." But again, when you say you have a Microsoft announcing they're going to make $1 billion investment in your community, that's huge news. I would add, I think for the security of the region, it's an absolute win all the way around, because the real estate value of a data center is going to help out tremendously with supporting the TIF that was necessary to develop that 20 and 11 corridor. Additionally, it not only stabilizes the TIF, but it doesn't really stretch the labor market that Gary brought up, which is going to be an ongoing concern, which is where we're going to get the body. So you're going to get the double benefit of a huge tax value for the real estate and not necessarily straining the employee resources. So I think it's an all-around massive win for Southeast Wisconsin.
Great, thank you. This is a related question, and I just want to set it up a bit. I'm sure that you guys have watched with interest other Racine County announcements that have included Oterra, which is a natural food coloring company. We've had CSL USA, an Italian-owned probiotics manufacturer, Scannell's new distribution facility for General Mills, and ND Packaging, a foreign-owned box plant. Related to this, the question I think I'm going to hit up Gary and Chad on this one is, as you engage with companies, what industries are showing the most interest in our region here, and what is driving their interest?
Sure.
So why don't we go over to Gary?
Yeah, I'll start, and I'll speak about the distribution industries that have shown a lot of interest in Southeast Wisconsin. We see a lot of third-party logistics providers. So an example of that would be DHL has a supply chain group. Ryder Logistics has a supply chain group. Another segment of the distribution world that we have in our community, obviously e-commerce, Amazon, well, they're not in the county, they're in the neighboring Kenosha County. And we also have a large, what I'll call industrial and packaging supplies industry. Uline would be a good example of that. And from my experience, those types of companies tend to be concerned or most concerned with certainly occupancy costs for property. They're cost sensitive. They also focus on proximity to where goods are made or come from and where their customers are. They also, and this is probably more true of Uline than the others, but they're concerned about, or they're interested in where they can find large land sites for built-to-suit development and large buildings for lease. Most of them also, I would say, have a preference for being in a business park or in a campus environment because they typically are growth minded and they want to make sure that there are opportunities for them to grow close by. And of course, labor is another concern, which we've talked about a little bit before. Chad?
Yeah, I would say, you touched on the distribution side of the industrial business. Of course, there's also the other side, which is, manufacturing or production oriented. And Greg, you kind of caught my ear here. You named a bunch of recent deals that are really clustered around the food industry. And I think that's been a cluster industry in the Racine County and in the region for some time. And I think it's kind of a build off of your earlier question with Microsoft too. When you have certain industries in an area that continue to open new facilities, it does catch the eye of others in that related area, probably trying to build off the existing labor base that's there, qualified in those skills. Of course, this area also has access to fresh water. That's helpful in production for food industries and also close to agricultural resources. So I think you're going to continue to see in this area on the industrial side a lot of food related uses, whether it's on the distribution side that Gary is talking about or the production side as well.
Thanks, Chad. And let's move over to Jeff. Jeff, none of the companies that I mentioned when I was rolling through the 4 or 5 companies really had a presence in Racine beforehand. And I was wondering if these companies might have had a similar logic or rationale for investing here. And Jeff, what are your perceptions as to what the primary location drivers are for companies? And are you seeing any emerging trends as to the location of where deals are originating?
Yeah, that's a great question. We had the opportunity to work with both Oterra and General Mills, so I can speak. One of the pleasant surprises with Oterra, and then another site selection assignment that we worked on, it actually ended up going to Franklin just on land availability. The access to labor, and I know we don't have enough employees, but that Racine location, especially out by Highway 20 and 11, when you do the drive times for especially that blue collar type workforce, you really want to hit within 30 minutes of access. And so out at 20 and 11, you have the distinct advantage of being able to pull from Kenosha, Racine, and the south side of Milwaukee. So that is a key driver. And even companies say coming from Milwaukee are surprised that the commute time to get down to 2011 off those new interchanges and in one of the business parks, it really isn't all that much different from going up into a suburban Milwaukee business park and trying to go through 35 mile per hour, multiple stop and go lights, et cetera. So the access point is key. And then speed to market is a key differentiator for the county moving forward. What the county has right now, based on the infrastructure investments of the last 5 years, you can get a building built quickly with power, water, sewer, entitlements, and you can shave 12 to 18 months. I mean, Chad and Gary, it's mind numbing to try to do a new ground up development with something that's not entitled or has access to utilities right now. I mean, you can spend 2 years of your life pulling your hair out trying to do it with no guarantees you're going to get to the other side. whereas that pro-business development or that pro-development mindset of the county, especially with the available sites by the interstate, are really driving a lot of the needs. And then going back to, you mentioned the Caledonia Corporate Park, what we found about that location, because much like I mentioned about Chicago, the Milwaukee Airport Market, Oak Creek and Franklin are running out of land. And a few of the sites that they have left, those communities really want more headquarter type, high-tech manufacturing. And so what we've seen with the Caledonia marketplace, it's really become an extension of that Milwaukee South market. General Mills led the way. That was a distribution center to support their Milwaukee production plant. They couldn't find a site for 300,000 feet. So that Highway K exit became the next logical point where they could get on and off the freeway quickly. And again, going back to the point, by the time you got on the freeway, got off the exit at Highway K, it was actually quicker than staying closer into that Milwaukee market based on 25, 35 mile per hour roadways and traffic signals.
Jeff, Chad, still on this theme, but Chad, do you foresee any new or underrepresented industries that are emerging and might be looking at our area right now more than ever before?
Yeah, I think going forward, you're going to see a lot of the same kind of the bread and butter industrial that you've seen before. Gary earlier touched on, kind of the rise of the 3PLs or third-party logistics firms. There'll be more increased activity. That's, a national trend as much as it is a local one. And Gary, I think you also made mention of it earlier, which was a great point. And really to build off Jeff's comment about built infrastructure, the Mount Pleasant area certainly has infrastructure that doesn't exist in many places in the entire country. So anything that's not been seen yet would probably be a large scale industrial manufacturer or contract manufacturer, probably in the tech base, to Gary's point, perhaps a chip type deal.
Thanks, Chad. Now, recent industry reports from NAI Global and Cushman Wakefield indicate that economic shifts are affecting industrial real estate development in certain areas of the US. I have a question related to this for all three of you. As you kind of look into your crystal balls, do you care to share any predictions on current economic conditions and their impact on the pace and the scale of development in our region here? So why don't we hit Gary up first?
Yeah, first of all, I would say that if you think back to the last couple of years, 21, 22, it was a landlord's market for industrial space. And you can, any metric you want to look at was very much in a landlord's favor: net absorption, vacancy rate, sales activity, rent growth, whatever. But today, there's a large supply of available speculative industrial space that's been recently delivered or is soon to be delivered. And, given where we are with the economy, if demand trails off, things may swing the other way. And so, given the supply and demand conditions and also the turmoil in the capital markets, new industrial building construction starts, I just don't think you're going to see much of that in 23 or the balance of 23 and even into 24, which will have the effect, though, of bringing the leasing market back into equilibrium.
Thanks, Gary. Chad?
Yeah, I'm probably a little bit less concerned than Gary might be on the supply demand balance, at least in the near term. Being throughout 2023, we'll see what 24 has to bring. But I think Gary was very much on point about the issue in the debt markets, availability of capital, that is going to certainly slow down any new developments, especially any new large scale developments that have yet to start. I don't think we're going to see much of that. Just because of tightening credit standards, cost of capital going, significantly higher, and that's a real strain on the development community.
Hey, Jeff, over to you.
Yeah, I believe that some of the macro factors going on right now in just the decoupling from the global economy, which is happening right now, the geopolitical unrest overseas. It is one of the most exciting times in Wisconsin because of our manufacturing heritage to be in this business. And there's a couple statistics that I picked up on over the past month. We've heard about this reshoring trend, and is it anecdotal? It makes sense. Yeah, we want to have control of our supply chain, but are we seeing that show up in the actual numbers? There are two numbers that just blew me away. NAIOP, which is a large development association, national, they reported a month ago that manufacturing investment, greenfield investment, not distribution, manufacturing was up 144% year over year. They clocked it in at $77 billion in investment. U.S. Census Bureau just released this week, is highlighted in the Wall Street Journal. They tracked manufacturing investment at $108 billion last year, record high in their tracking metrics. So you are definitely seeing this wave of investment into the Americas, in which, of course, if you're in manufacturing, it's great. It costs a little bit more to manufacture here. So we have this conversation about inflation and what we can expect with continued inflation. But the reality is, and Gary made a very key point in the intro, security of your goods, your ability to produce, your ability to distribute, not only from weather events, natural disasters, but what's going on globally is going to be very, very important. And I think is very important as people are looking at how they're going to invest in their footprints over the next decade.
Great, thanks. As we reflect back over the past few years, thinking about the pandemic and the disruption to supply chains that have resulted in higher construction costs, I'm wondering, I'm going to ask each of you, are you continuing to see these impacts in the market, or are construction costs starting to stabilize? Why don't we'll go reverse order here. Jeff?
I would say moderate in Southeast Wisconsin, maybe low single-digit increases where it had been double-digit increases for the last several years. Nationally, some of our national developer clients have mentioned in the primary markets, which tend to lead the curve versus a Wisconsin, they've seen pricing drop in construction in bids that they would have sent out last fall, 5 to 10%. We have not seen that show up yet, at least some of the developers that I'm talking to in Southeast Wisconsin, but I think it could be on the horizon. And frankly, we needed a breather. I mean, Chad, Gary, tell the crowd a little bit about how much it costs a building to build right now compared to what it was even 5 years ago.
Yeah, why don't we roll over to you, Chad, on that?
Well, we don't have enough time for our tales of woe here on the construction side, but Jeff is really on point with all of his answers there. I mean, we're talking about unprecedented construction cost increases. Over the last couple of years, it cost 50% more to build an industrial building than it did, a couple of years ago. That's never been seen before. And of course, that put a strain on the entire system, even through users. But even more so, not only was the cost, but just the ability to get materials. That supply chain disruption, Greg, that you mentioned, was something that needed to be actively managed and a great resource strain for the entire development process. So again, I'd say it's stabilized, to Jeff's point, and reiterate that, perhaps with some softening in some areas, but there's still other pockets of construction materials that continue to be difficult to get a hold of and increase in cost as well. So,
thanks, Chad. Gary, what are you seeing?
Well, first of all, let me just, going back to something Chad said, whenever we pull out a development budget, I always tell everybody we need a defibrillator before we review it, because it is, it's very difficult to swallow, all these costs. And we, like Zilber, I'm thinking of our experience. We built a building. We started in 2019 in Enterprise Business Park. It was a building that was about 440,000 square feet. And we also started construction. We have some projects that are under construction now, which we started in 2022. And the difference in cost between those projects on a per square foot basis, it's 50% higher for the buildings that started in 2022 versus the one we started in 2019. So, it's a similar experience to what Zilber has. I think that, yeah, we're still seeing on supply chain today, we still have issues, particularly in cement.
Yeah.
And, the United States imports a lot of cement from places like Turkey, which is, neighbors a war zone, which I think has impacted our ability to import cement. Electrical switchgear is currently a big problem. It's more than a year out. So you're kind of forced to order the electrical gear before you even start a building. And I think a lot of that is due to some of the factory closures by companies like Siemens or Schneider or Eaton, the other big producers of that kind of gear at times had factory closures. I think with respect to 2023, I expect, given where interest rates are, residential to slow down, which is almost 50% of construction volume in this country. Industrial, back to what I said earlier about supply demand conditions in capital markets, I think that'll slow down a bit, which will have the effect of stabilizing prices. But then you've got, the government's infrastructure spending is going to increase, which should have the opposite effect. And also, the construction industry, like most other businesses, has a labor shortage. So I would expect labor costs to be going up. They're putting upward pressure on construction prices. But with all that said, in terms of 2023 construction costs versus last year, I would expect to have price increase of 2 to maybe 4%, which is more in line with the historical average and not what we've experienced, since starting with the pandemic.
Yeah, buckle up, Gary and Chad. I'm coming back at you with this question, and I'll move over to Jeff for a question. Gary and Chad, what adjustments are you making to your current projects due to these changes in the economy? And you talk about, interest rate climate and how that might be impacting some of your current tenant decisions. So why don't we go over to Chad and then we'll come back to Gary.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's a couple of, I'll do maybe some positive and negative things. One, we're just continuing to reevaluate our risk in a rapidly changing environment. So that's either cost of capital or just general economic conditions. So the world seems to be changing and our economic condition or position continues to change. It almost seems like on a weekly basis with new news, whether it's geopolitical stuff or domestic matters. So a more watchful eye on risk management, which is difficult really in our business because we're making fixed asset decisions that have a long gestation period. So when you decide to go or not go on an industrial building project, that's a year-long endeavor. And a lot changes in the world during a year. So you have to be very mindful and try to be forward-looking as to what could happen during that time period. But on the, I guess on the non-risk management side, one thing that we're doing is we're continuing to evaluate the value of kind of sustainable development practices in a lot of our projects. There's certainly been a large focus on the ESG movement, whether it's through government funding or just general corporate interest in it. And that's something that's had, light interest in the development community, over the years, or only kind of sporadically done by some. So we believe it's going to continue to be a long-term trend and really a requirement by users, over the next decade.
Thanks, Chad. Gary, anything to add?
In terms of changes to the projects because of the economy, well, as I mentioned earlier, we're concerned with advanced procurement of materials. I think that we also are trying to improve the quality and image of buildings that we construct today. I think that that's particularly important to companies that manufacturing companies that might want to use a building as a headquarters, and it gives them a competitive advantage in terms of labor. So we had a medical company come and look at one of our buildings recently, and I think they appreciate that approach. We also, in terms of building modifications, given where we are, there's some upgrades that we're doing to our sprinkler systems because we find that companies today are using plastics or have plastics more in their warehouses. Batteries are more prevalent in the warehouse, and so again, we're upgrading sprinkler systems to account for that or accommodate that. We also are modifying our buildings for future electrical vehicle charges because the world is moving towards the electric vehicle. And then another thing that we've observed is that we are often asked by companies to expand the electrical service at our properties. So we have larger electrical rooms that we're building now. We need to make sure that they can accommodate additional switch gear. And companies need the extra power we find for manufacturing. Sometimes they want the space air conditioned, conveying systems, and even robotics.
Great, thanks, Gary. Jeff, I'm gonna head over to you with this question. So Southeast Wisconsin has experienced nice growth of speculative industrial development over the last few years. And the Commercial Association of Realtors Wisconsin reported that 7.8 million square feet was under construction in Southeast Wisconsin in Q4 2022, with 1.4 million square feet in Racine County. And this relates to one of the questions that we have in the chat. I've got kind of a three-parter going here. Can you comment on the availability of industrial real estate in Racine County? How might it compare to other areas? Are there gaps in the market? And what's your perspective on this availability right now? That relates to our third question in the top.
Sure. So as we all suggested, one of the benefits of being in Racine County is availability of land, and that cuts both ways because in a boom development cycle, it's a lot easier to pick up a parcel and start constructing. So as we're looking at 2023, a blessing in disguise is the complicated financing market because it has slowed down the pipeline of new speculative projects. Okay, this by midsummer, end of summer in Racine, and hopefully some leases get signed with some nice tenants over the next couple months. But Racine will be looking at arguably a record level of Class A vacancy. We're tracking about 2.5 million square feet that's going to be available in the market. Now, a benefit of that, though, goes back to as Gary mentioned, these are quality buildings, well located, and they're available immediately. So I think that's going to be a key differentiator for this region. Going back to my comment about Lake County down in Illinois, they don't have real estate that's readily available. So when you look at Racine and Kenosha, there has been a proliferation of spec buildings that were developed and are going to be delivering this year. So on paper, it looks a little scary if you're a banker or an asset manager. My prediction is with the strength of manufacturing in the state of Wisconsin, we will be having a different conversation 12 months from now, even if the general economy slows down or even enters into recession. I think we have a tailwind to the manufacturing economy for the next 5 to 10 years. And those manufacturers are going to continue to make investment decisions based on a longer term view and not a quarter to quarter viewpoint of what may or may not be happening with economic growth or what Jay Powell might be doing with a quarter point move here or there. So those are all good things. But I would, if you're an occupier right now, you are going to see more options than you would have in the prior, probably historically.
Okay. And then I'm getting specific here in the chat. If you guys can eyeball the first question here, I'll read it for everybody. It's related to this discussion we're having now. What are current improved business park land prices per square foot? What are lease rates for large industrial buildings net of tenant improvements? Any perspective on that? Can anyone jump in on that?
Well, I'll just answer.
Okay, we're ready to go here. We'll go Chad first.
No, I'll go ahead and jump on it.
Okay.
Bunch of chickens with Jeff and Gary here, but we'll retaliate.
I don't want to undercut you.
No, all kidding aside, I think I'll answer the land question, which is I don't think there's a lot of available existing land that's for sale. So it takes a tremendous amount of time in order to bring on an industrial development. And there's really little value in being a land seller from a developer's perspective, because the cost of land and cost of infrastructure is so high. You would have to go through 2 years of effort and then sell it at perhaps either break even at best or marginal spread. So we need to develop buildings, we need to hold them over a long period of time in order to stay in business. So I don't think there really is a price on available land, because I don't think it's available.
Okay.
As far as market rents, I'll kick it over. It's a really varied answer, to be honest. But what I would say is you're certainly starting probably with, and for the whole audience, there's a couple different types of rents and deals. What I'm referring to is something called base rent, which is just rent for the building. And of course, there's other operating expenses. So that's for new buildings, and that's how the market structures those deals. I mean, I would say you're going to be in the 6s a square foot, depending upon your level of TIs in general.
Okay. Thanks, Chad. Jeff, looks like you were going to jump in there.
No, I just add, Chad makes an interesting point about availability of land. And I mean, there are a lot of the development buildings we're talking about, bigger 3PL users, substantial 100,000 square foot tenants. There are a lot of businesses in Racine County that are privately held that need a 20 to 50,000 square foot building, and they'd love to buy one. It's just not available. And I'll use the MLG Renaissance Park as an example, because Chad brought it up. That model of where you can come in as a developer, take down 100, 200 acres, put in the infrastructure and sell off individual lots, that model just doesn't work based on what Chad stated. So if I'm a privately held business and I want to grow from 20 to 50,000 square feet and I want to own, it's very, very challenging right now. There's no buildings that are available and I think, as we've discussed with construction costs, you're going from context of my real estate's worth $40 or $50 a square foot to it's going to cost me $150 a square foot to build brand new. And oh, by the way, I can't even find a 10-acre site to do that. So that part of the market is challenging. I would suggest that Mount Pleasant, Highway 11, 20 area, north of Highway 11, you are going to see some additional parcels, I think, over the years come online. Yorkville, I think, is trying to figure out some stuff west of the freeway, but land price, if you could find a site that's ready to go, I mean, it's probably $150,000 an acre right now in that community, in that area.
Thanks, Jeff. Gary, you have anything to add on this question?
Yeah, I agree with what Jeff just said, and that's been our experience. The last acquisition that we made of farmland. I would also say that probably if I was a tenant and I was looking for Class A space, I'd first look to see if there were any buildings that were within 3 years old that have availability. Because if you go back 3 years, you're going to get buildings that were constructed before the pandemic that have a much lower basis. And there's a possibility to get a lower rent than the $6 that Chad described, which is characteristic of brand new buildings that, the basis on those reflects all the supply chain problems and cost increases of materials in the industry, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, thanks. I'm really a shout out to the audience here. It's taking the heat off me on trying to come up with these great questions for our awesome panel. We've got some really great questions here. I'm going to hone in on the second question, or now first in command here on labor. We've all been reading about layoffs in the tech sector. And RCEDC continues to hear that the availability of talent is important to business location decisions. So I want to tease this out over two questions. I'm going to hit up Jeff and Chad. First off, how is talent affecting the region's ability to attract new businesses and support expansions? And how have you been able to address these concerns with prospects? So I think we're really diving into this question we have in the chat. So Jeff, do you want to hit that first?
Yeah, robots and automation. In leading up to this, the Biz Times ran a very, very interesting story on Kenosha and Racine County. I want to say it was fall of 2021. that was discussing just the explosion of industrial growth and really the lagging population growth for the corridor. And I was just looking at some numbers. In the past decade, Kenosha and Racine have grown the industrial base 50%. They started a decade ago, they were about 40 million square feet. The two counties combined are now up to 60 million feet. That story from Biz Times, now 18 months old, Racine County only grew its population 1.2% in that decade. So that is a mismatch. And I'm an industrial guy, but the county in Southeast Wisconsin needs to figure out how to deliver more workforce housing and not just in the apartments. I think single family residents are key. I know RCEDC has done a great job of trying to aggregate data of what kind of supplies coming online. I think there's 3,600 units coming into the county, which is great. I would point to Sheboygan County Economic Development Corp. They had 8 large employers pony up about $8 million. Right. They used some ARPA money, and Sheboygan County Economic Development Corp is spearheading, not for profit. They selected a builder. I think they're delivering 28 homes in Sheboygan Falls over the next 12 months. They're selling 1,100 to 1,300 square foot single family homes for, I believe, $225,000 to $250,000, which is right in line with affordability for a family that's making $17 to $18 an hour. So the movement into delivering affordable housing units is going to be very, very critical for this corridor with the amount of industrial activity and development that we've created. Because while the automation is coming, it's not coming fast enough. And the reality is, what we found out is we still need people that can physically they can make things, move things, and operate these machines.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. Chat.
I think Jeff said it perfectly. That's the elephant in the room. Businesses need people to work there, and people need places to live. And more affordable housing is not always the most glamorous project to have evaluated. I think a lot of municipalities get attracted to probably more amenity rich, glitzier developments, and that's just priced out of the market for what these laboring people need to live in. And even worse, to Jeff's point, is in order to make some of the numbers work, there's going to have to be governmental subsidy for that type of housing. Also, something that's not very popular. So it's either going to have to get popular or you're going to slow down in your growth. And that's a big challenge for government and business leaders, not only in this area, but a lot of places. Those that figured it out, to Jeff's point, are going to succeed a little bit more than those that can't get their head around that issue and find a solution for it.
Great, thanks, Chad. Gary, the pace of technological change affects all of our lives, and I'm curious as how do you see technology impacting the future of industrial real estate development in Southeast Wisconsin and Racine County?
Sure. So let's see. We being Ashley, we recently installed our first construction webcam at our construction project in Mount Pleasant. And for those of you that don't know what that is, it's we have a camera that sits high above the construction site and streams live video of what's going on the project or on the site. And we use that for marketing purposes. And it also gives people that are out of town the ability to follow progress at the site. There's also more use of digital technologies by our general contractor. If we go to the site, the construction superintendent has an iPad, and he can pull up digitized blueprints, do field markups, take progress photos, track construction issues, and collaborate with other people electronically. As Jeff said earlier, companies are using robots in the warehouse to solve labor shortages. Kroger down in Kenosha County has a fulfillment center. This is in Pleasant Prairie, and they use robots to pick groceries. Amazon, they purchased a robotics company about 10 years ago, and they commonly use robots in their fulfillment centers. Another thing, and this is true of our project in Mount Pleasant, we've used steel and concrete, which has been produced to reduce carbon emissions. That's also part of the industry today. Another thing that's coming is what I'll describe as, or what's called smart building technology. So I think we're all familiar with this in your home. So through devices like Google Home or Amazon Echo, you can control your house temperature, lighting, security, and even appliances. There's a similar technology now that can be found in commercial buildings. So, for example, in an office environment, you can have a sensor in every room, which feeds information to a computer, and then that will automatically adjust the environment in the room to make sure that everything runs smoothly and efficiently. And I know that there are also companies that are putting sensors on their machines, which can be monitored, and that data and some machine learning, they can predict failures before they happen. So there's an opportunity for proactive maintenance and reducing downtime. So there's a lot going on in the business, and it's going to look much different, 5-10 years from now than it does today.
We're winding this clock quickly. I want to squeeze in a couple more questions. There's a really interesting question back to the chat here. If you guys are scanning the chat, and are two that are related. Are you encountering increased interest in the addition of LEED principles and other sustainable features to buildings that are being requested by companies? And related to that, extend the same question for construction costs per square foot, what the range might be. Can anyone jump in on that question?
Well, I'll hop in, and I would say the answer is yes, we are seeing an increased interest in it. Now, of course, sustainable development comes with an upfront cost in some categories, especially when you get into there was a mention here of LEED development practices, which is really, an accounting of it, or certification. So that comes at a cost, upfront costs, long-term operational cost savings. But in the past, I think users had tended to have an interest in it, but not wanting to, pay for that. Now I think what we're seeing is users that are assigning value to it and sharing some of that cost. So it becomes more viable for the investment or development community to do that because the value is being recognized by users. Mainly more larger.
Oh, go ahead, Chad.
Maybe around larger corporate users, I would say is the start of it now. Smaller and mid-sized business have yet to really adopt a widespread, sincere interest in it.
Okay, thanks. So we're in the lightning round now. So I'm going to hit you up, each of you, quickly on this final question to conclude us. And it's looking to the future. As you know, our RCEDC works closely with our municipal partners to be prepared for future development. So looking to the future, what is next for industrial real estate development in Southeast Wisconsin and Racine County? What can municipal and community leaders do now to prepare for what's next? And we're going to go in this order: Gary, Chad, then Jeff. Just quickly, Gary.
Yeah, well, this is sort of a hot topic for me. We know that there's the infrastructure bill, and I would like to see the city of Racine expand their bus service so more people could get to or from places of employment.
Yeah.
And I can tell you that with respect to our project in Sturtevant and Mount Pleasant, or Enterprise Business Park, the bus service comes close to us, but it goes into the Renaissance Business Park. And I think it makes sense to have it come down Highway H or Renaissance Boulevard, a third half of a mile, head to the west on Enterprise Way, and then back to the north on International, and it would give people from the community a lot more access to employers.
Thanks, Gary. Chad, what would you like to see looking to the future?
just a continued effort on retaining their population, to continue to, those that live here, to continue to stay and work here, and then also attracting outside people to come live. So marketing as much to developers and users as you do, hopefully, with a little bit more robust campaign to the population to attract them to the area to live here.
Thanks, Chad. Jeff, what would you like to see?
Yeah, and I'm not stating this in support of the policies. It's just what has happened. We are going to have a federal government that is very involved in domestic manufacturing policy, and I think both, whether Republican or Democrat controlled, you are seeing this interest in making things in America. So the CHIPS Act with the $50 billion, the Inflation Reduction Act, which is going to pump a tremendous amount of support into the electric vehicle market. Electric vehicles, and Gary, just real quick, I want your opinion on what because I know you're active in Detroit, and I know Foxconn has made an announcement about the battery side. Electric vehicles are about 5% market penetration. By 2030, there is a suggestion, and this is being funneled down by the big auto producers to the first tier auto suppliers, 50% of the market's going to be EV. So in the upper Midwest, which has this base of knowledge in manufacturing, I would think those two things are going to be definite opportunities. The accessibility to water from Lake Michigan in pharmaceuticals, healthcare, that Mount Pleasant area, there is a unique opportunity has been discussed that a large OEM of some type should be able to be attracted to this community within 5 years, I think.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Gary and Chad and Jeff, I really want to thank you guys for joining us this morning, for your investment and promotion of Racine County, for providing your insights this morning. I thought the discussion was really super informative and really energizing. I wish I could sit here and talk with you guys all day long. A note to everyone, our meeting was recorded and it will be posted on our RCEDC website for your review. And I just want to echo something David said at the outset of our meeting. We encourage everyone in our audience this morning to attend our RCEDC's 40th annual celebration on Thursday, May 4th. Details of the celebration and the upcoming Greater Racine County familiarization tours are also available on our website. So please mark your calendar. We really want to see you at our meeting on May 4th. And again, thank you once again to our panelists. Thanks to our Leadership Council and other attendees for joining us this morning. I hope everyone has a great day and we'll look forward to our next time together. So goodbye, everybody.